agency today. Well, let me rephrase that. We are wrapping up agency today. You guys got to keep going. But we only got a few more things left to do. And one thing we need to do, we talked last week, we ended talking more specifically about working with buyers. And we talked about our responsibilities in working with buyers. Good morning. We talked about different ways that we could work. Maybe we're working as a seller sub-agent, maybe we're working as a buyer's agent. You know, when we're working as a buyer's agent, we might be working as, working with, I should say, assisting our buyer find a for sale by owner, or assisting the buyer in a limited listing service firm where we may not be communicating with an agent. We may be communicating directly with the seller. So again, make sure you're going back and reviewing, stick with agency. I'm telling you guys, if you put it down for 4 or 5 weeks and then try to pick it back up and get ready for the test, you're going to forget what we've already covered. So please incorporate a little bit of agency into your study time so you can keep it fresh. And it's challenging, I get it, because now we're moving on today. We're moving on to contracts. So you got to stay up, but you got to remember what we've already covered. By the way, we had a question come in about kind of the end of class and the state exam and all that. We're going to talk about the process for you to apply to take the state exam, the process for you to apply to get your real estate license, and that whole process. We're going to talk about that when we're done with Unit 10. So give me about another week and a half or so, and we'll go through that kind of step by step. I know some of you are more ready to go than others, so I definitely want to have that conversation. So those of you that want to start your application can. So that's coming in a few classes. Any questions before we get started on anything? Morning. Yes, ma'am. Is that Caitlin? Hey, Caitlin.
Hi. Yeah, I had to go back over this past weekend because when we talked about limited service agreement, I was thinking in my head after we had went through the class, I was like, how does that not violate the antitrust laws with price fixing? So I went back, and hopefully this just helps people too by me saying this, because I didn't know. I was like, wouldn't that violate? But I went through and saw that that you have to calculate it, like how many hours that task would take, and then put in the hourly rate. Yeah. So I kind of stuck on that for a second.
That's a great connection, Caitlin. Thank you. And how these limited service firms, because remember, if we want to back up for just a second, they don't charge a percentage or maybe a full flat fee. They may do like a la carte pricing. So when we say limited services, we say the consumer selects what service they want the firm to provide. So it's like ordering off a menu. I want this, this, and this. And then based off of what you order is what the charge to the consumer is going to be. How that doesn't violate price fixing, remember, who determines the price? Who determines the amount that we're going to charge?
The principal and between the principal and the client, or in yourself together.
And exactly, the firm determines how much to charge. So if the firm is set up as a limited service and say, we're going to charge you $400 to put it in MLS, we're going to charge you $150 to do an open house on Sunday. You guys with me? That's the firm setting their policy. And that's absolutely where price fixing comes in, is nobody else can come in and tell the firm how much to charge and how to charge.
I also had a quick question on the 6, measuring the property, the 6 inches rule. I know it applies to townhouses and duplexes, but then when you go in to a house to measure it, do you also add the 6 inches to the wall width
Only if you can't measure from
from the
outside.
outside? Okay, yeah, I just
So
wanted to
if the second story isn't the
Yeah.
same size as the first, or if the basement's underground and you can't get to the outside, then you go inside, yep, and add
And-
6 inches.
Okay, and it just doesn't apply to condos.
Correct, yep.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
Sure.
Okay,
Good, thank you.
thank
One more
you.
thing, absolutely. One more thing about limited service, guys, make sure we're good. Limited service firms only limit the services. They do not limit the duties that they owe their client. I can see all your mouths move. What duties do we owe our clients? 2 words. Old car. So even though they're limiting the services and saying, I'm going to charge you X amount to put it in MLS, they still owe their client old car. Everybody with me? We limit the services, not the duties. Thank you for that. So we are still in unit 8. And one of the last things, we got 2 more things to cover in this unit. One of the last things, we need to briefly go over our exclusive buyer agency agreement. As with the listing agreement, if it's highlighted, it's in the syllabus. The Real Estate Commission says if we're familiar with the syllabus, then we know what is the possible candidates for our exam. So eventually you guys are going to need to read this whole thing. But let me try to help you by just getting you focused on the highlights for now, and then you can build up to it. You'll go through this whole thing in post licensing. Obviously, before you work with a buyer for the first time, you'll go through this form as well. So is everybody good with what the highlights mean? Give me some thumbs ups, please. Are we good with the highlights? And again, if it's highlighted, then it could be a good candidate for a test question. So this is our exclusive buyer agency agreement. Again, as with our listing agreement, we have guidelines to complete. Most of our bigger forms have a guideline to complete. So it just kind of gives explanations about information to know before you start filling in all these blanks. So if you're ever stuck, if you have a question on how to complete your buyer agency agreement, you can always refer, and your firm will provide the guidelines, but you can always refer to the guidelines. Exclusive buyer agency agreement is entered onto this date between the buyer and the firm. Always remember, our agency agreements are between the client or the principal and the firm, not the individual agent. One thing, we're going to see a lot of similarities from here in the listing agreement, but one thing that is different in the buyer's agency agreement is identifying the type of property that the buyer is looking to buy. So is it going to be residential or commercial or other? Are we looking at agricultural or industrial? We also need to list the general location. And the general location, I mean, it could be the state of North Carolina. It could be 123 Main Street, right? So if we have the opportunity to work with a buyer, you may want to start with your general location where you're willing to work. Do you just want to work the triad? You may want to put the triad in here. You're just going to work Charlotte. You just put Charlotte. You guys with me? That lets the buyer know this is where I'm willing to go. If they want to go out of that area, we need to come back and have this conversation. I just mentioned being able to put in 123 Main Street. We gave this example last week when we were talking about oral buyer agency. Remember, I can work with a buyer under an oral buyer agency agreement up until the time I'm ready to present an offer on their behalf. Oral buyer agency. I don't have to commit them in writing until I'm ready to present an offer on their behalf. So the question came up last week. What if you're ready to present an offer for this buyer, but they're unwilling to sign the agency agreement? First off, shake your head, yes or no. Can I present it anyway? If they say, no, I'm not going to sign that. Can I present it anyway? No, because I cannot work with a buyer under an oral agreement when I'm presenting an offer on their behalf. So I need to make sure we're good on that. Oral buyer agency. I can be an oral buyer agent. I can owe that buyer old car. up until the time I'm ready to present an offer. And they found the property, I wrote it up, we filled in the blanks, and then I said, I need you to sign this, and they say, nope, I'm not going to do it. Let me ask you again, can I present the offer on their behalf? No, good. We've got to get that in writing, this agency agreement in writing to present it. So one solution for that buyer that you may have is to fill in a general location. And here in particular, we could actually say 123 Main Street, or the property that your buyer wants to make the offer on. And this would create an exclusive buyer agency agreement just for this one property. Offer goes through, I represent you, I'm your agent. If the offer doesn't work out, the contract doesn't work out, then hopefully we can keep going back to our oral arrangement until that buyer finds that next property. So I say all that to say, one, it's a good opportunity to review oral buyer agency real quick. But I just say that to say as well that there's really no wrong answer to put in that general location. It's a conversation between you and the buyer where they're looking and where they're wanting to buy. The other there, just anything else is anything else? Is your buyer looking in a certain price range or, certain information? Do they want a 2-story? Something else that might be important to them. So type of property, I'm getting a request to go over by oral buyer agency. Guys, I apologize, but I don't have time to do it again. Remember, we've recorded. We talked about oral buyer agency in Unit 7 and in Unit 8. So I encourage you to go back through the recording. I apologize. So the type of property, again, something we don't see in the listing agreement. The term of the agreement, remember, a must with all of our agency agreements. All written agency agreements must have a definite end date. So the term of the agreement shall begin on this date and terminates as follows. And then we got a couple choices here. If you're working with a buyer who intends to purchase a single property, then this agreement will terminate on this 11:59 p.m. on this date. Or you might be working with a buyer that intends to purchase more than one property. If the buyer's purchasing one property, once they buy, our agency agreement's over, right? I've fulfilled the purposes. But what if an investor calls you on January 2nd and says, my portfolio allows me to buy 15 properties this year. Can you help me? We're going to have our hands full with that buyer, right? But we want the opportunity to work with them with more than one property. So the term of the agreement. See, I'll address that question in just one second. We also talk about compensation of firm, and guys, with the buyer's agency agreement, I think this is a problem topic. So please make a note. We're still on page 1. Please make a note to look over the compensation of the firm and the buyer's agency agreement. So we start by saying that the firm acknowledges a non-refundable retainer fee. Your firm may allow you to collect a retainer fee, to collect money from the buyer up front. If we make it to closing, it'll be deducted from their closing costs. If we don't, then you've collected a little bit of money for your time and effort and wear and tear on your car and gas and all those things running out and showing on property. I will say this, whether your firm allows it or not, obviously is up to your firm. But if you're going to collect a retainer fee, we got to get the agreement in writing. We cannot collect a retainer fee on an oral buyer agency agreement. So if your firm allows, here's our retainer fee in the amount of X amount. Buyer agrees that the firm's fee for services shall be in the amount of, and we're going to put in a percentage or dollar amount, whatever your firm expects to collect when you assist this buyer in buying a home. So remember, commission is all determined by firm policy. And your firm will say, when this buyer closes, we expect to collect X amount. So we're telling the buyer up front what we expect to help them. firm shall seek the fee from a listing firm or from the seller if there is no listing firm. So we're telling the buyer in the buyer's agency agreement, I'm always going to ask the seller to pay my commission first. But if they can't or won't, who's left? Who's left to pay you? How many parties to the transaction? 2. Let's call them seller and buyer. So if the seller says no, who's left? The buyer. You know, if it's an MLS, it may not be a problem. But what if your buyer's going after for sale by owner? What if the commission stated in MLS? I shared this example with you guys last week. I had somebody offering to pay me 0.5%. 0.5%. That's not enough. I'm not going to tell you guys what my firm expects to collect when working with a buyer, but I will tell you it's more than 0.5%. So if MLS is advertising 0.5%, who do I go to collect the rest? I go to the buyer. I think the idea of a buyer paying commission is very foreign to us. But guys, if the seller's not going to do it or can't do it, the only person left to pay us is the buyer. So we must address commission in our agency agreement, in our buyer's agency agreement. If you want to get paid, do you want to get paid? Yeah, then we have to address commission. Please, 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 always remember, agency agreements are employment contracts. And every employment contract is going to address how and when we expect to get paid. So firm, we're always going to ask the seller first. If they can't or won't, if buyer purchases a property where the compensation offered by the listing firm is less than the fee, we just identified what we expect to collect up here under 4B. If it's less than the fee or where no compensation is offered, buyer and firm agree that the buyer will pay the difference and the compensation unless otherwise provided. Firm will timely inform the buyer if the compensation offered is less than expected. Again, our buyer's agency agreement says, I will always ask the seller first. Always. That's what it says right there. But if they can't or won't, who's up? The buyer. I think that's a problem topic. Again, because it's not the norm. We always hear about buyers don't have to pay commission. Oh, they do. They just don't pay it directly. Do I have any questions just on commission and the buyer's agency agreement? Please, I mean, it's highlighted, so I think you should read it anyway. It's an employment contract. I had a pre-licensing student reach out to me once and said, show me in the book where it says it's an employment contract. And I sat down and found 8 places just like that. So agency agreements, oh, she said, oh, I guess I didn't see them. Agency agreements are employment contracts. Is everybody with me? Write that down. Agency agreements are employment contracts. We're being hired to do a job. Do you expect to get paid when you do the job? I do. So compensation of the firm when working with this buyer. This last piece down here just addresses any bonuses. We see this in the listing agreement as well. But I think we're going to come across it more often with the buyers. Let's say your buyer's interested in a new construction and the builder is offering a $500 bonus, which means you're going to make $500 more than what we just agreed to up here. You're going to get paid your full commission, plus you're getting that $500 bonus. Any bonuses, rebates, anything of valuable consideration, we need to notify our principal. The principal has the right to know when we're going to make more than the agreed upon commission. And we need to disclose that bonus in a timely manner. A timely manner is not sitting at the closing table with your buyer saying, as soon as you buy, I get an extra $500. Did you give them time to think about it? No. A timely manner is before they see the property, before they make the offer. They need to know when they're making their offer, they need all of the information. So if you want to tell them before you show it, before you take them to the new construction, you can say, if you move forward, I'm going to make a $500 bonus. The latest you need to do it is before they present the offer. That's what we mean by timely manner. We're going to talk more about bonuses, commission, timely manner, that kind of thing when we get to our license law and commission rule, but it is addressed in the agency agreement. As with the listing agreement, we talk about when we earn our commission. If the buyer directly or indirectly enters into an agreement to purchase, so we have brought that ready, willing, and able buyer. Remember, when we earn our commission is different than when we actually get paid. So when we earn our commission is when we connect buyer and seller to that ready, willing, and able buyer. Buyer's agency agreement also has a protection period. Again, we saw this in the listing agreement. This says if the buyer finds a property after X amount of days of our termination of our agency agreement, we may still be entitled to a commission. So protecting our commission, same thing in the listing agreement. We talked about when we earned a commission, compensation will be due and payable at the distribution of the proceeds from the sale. So we earn it when we connect them, but when are we paid? When it closes, distribution of the proceeds of the sale. So we spell that out. Our agency agreements are bilateral contracts, meaning both parties have duties and responsibilities to each other. And we have to spell out those duties and responsibilities. So the firm is going to spell out their duties to the buyer. Our general duties are going to perform the terms of this agreement, find a property at a price and terms acceptable to the buyer, present an offer, counter offer, negotiate on their behalf, and disclose material facts. Those are our general duties. We owe this buyer confidentiality, not just about their personal and financial information, or particularly, I should say, about their personal and financial information. Reasonable standard of care. Firm shall exercise ordinary care, comply with laws, regulations, treat everybody honestly, not knowingly give them false information. Representation of others. Remember when we talk about agency, exclusivity is a one-way street, meaning the buyer can only date one firm. But guess what? The firm is dating multiple buyers. Guys, there are 40 of you in Julie's real estate firm right now. None of us are going to make money if only one of you can work with one buyer at a time. As the BIC of Julie's real estate shop, I want all of you out there working with a buyer. I want all of you out there working with a seller. Multiple buyers and sellers if you want. You guys with me? So exclusivity, first off, is a one-way street. What this is saying, representation of others, what if you have two buyers both interested in the same property? Boy, now this gets interesting, doesn't it? This takes us back to where we need to be fair. The information I'd share with one buyer needs to be the same information I share with the other. I need to provide both the same numbers, the same information. Guys, bottom line with buyers, they all have different risk tolerances. We're not telling them what to offer. We're not telling them, we're offering suggestions, but bottom line, what they offer is up to them. So if we're sharing the same information to multiple people, they may have different risk tolerances. They may want to make different offers, different terms. We can never, ever, ever share the terms of one buyer's offer with another buyer. Does that make sense? So if I'm working with two buyers, I can't pit the two together. I know what the Jones are offering. Smiths, I think you guys can beat them. I can't pit them together. That needs to remain confidential. Submission of information to the listing service. If it is, for example, a for sale by owner, it's not an MLS, is it? But upon closing, your firm may want to put it in MLS for comp purposes only. We're not making it active. We're not advertising. We're just putting it in so we can use it for comps. So appraisers can use it for comps. So that's what that's saying. If this isn't already an MLS, we may put it in when it closes. Let's see. Can changes be made to this agreement? Absolutely. We can always change it, that the change has to be made in writing. Can you make a written change oral? What do you think? Written change orally? No. A written change can only be changed in writing. Another question comes in. Do I need to tell the buyer that I have another buyer that is interested in the same property? There's not a commission rule that spells that out. So that would be up to you. There is no commission rule. What I do know the commission rule says is I can't share their information. This guy's offering 150. Why don't you come in at 153? You guys with me? We can't pit them together. Here is another must in our written agency agreements. All of our written agency agreements have the non-discrimination clause. Again, we're going to talk about fair housing, protected classes when we get to Unit 19. So we'll identify the protected classes and discuss the importance. By the way, National Association of Realtors has coined April as Fair Housing Month. And that's the meeting I have this week with my firm. We always do fair housing in April. So you guys don't know, I may come back with some good information for us when we get to Unit 19 and talk about it. Buyer's duties to the firm. Buyer agrees to cooperate with the firm, working exclusively. There's that word exclusively with the firm. Referring the firm any information. So if the buyer's interested in a for sale by owner, let me call the for sale by owner. Let me talk to the for sale by owner. That's why the buyer hired me. I don't want buyers and sellers talking and accidentally putting them under contract, right? So let me handle this. That's why you're paying me the big bucks. So refer any information to me. Comply with reasonable requests to supply financial or personal information. Being available to view properties. It's hard for me to help you buy a house if you're never available for me to take you out and show you a house. Examine properties only by appointment made by the firm. This is common. Buyers go under contract and they think they can just show up at the house at any time. Have a conversation with your buyers. It's not their house yet. So until it becomes their home, they need to be respectful of the fact that somebody still owns it. Somebody may still live there. There was a case a couple of years ago. Sellers were sitting in the living room one evening watching TV, and they caught something out their window, and they looked up, and there are the buyers peering in the window. I don't know about y'all, but my house, that's a good way to get yourself popped. That's what I'm going to say about that. So make sure your buyers know that it's not their house yet. They just can't show up. If they want to go measure, if they want to go look at paint samples, if they want to take mom and dad to go over and ooh and ah, all that's great. Just do it through me. I will schedule the appointment. I will notify the sellers that we're coming, and I will be with you to make sure you're not doing anything. The buyers aren't doing anything to the home yet. Conducting all negotiations and communications through the firm. Let me handle your negotiation and communication. Conducting due diligence. That's the buyer's opportunity to learn as much about the property as they possibly can. We're going to talk about what that means when we get to Unit 10. And then the buyer's responsible for paying for anything in their examination. So their surveys, inspections, whatever they decide to do. Other professional advice. Most buyers don't know home inspectors. Most buyers don't know closing attorneys. Most buyers don't know pest inspectors and surveyors and lenders. They may be calling on you guys for help. So I can offer professional advice. I can say, here's 2 or 3 home inspectors that my firm or I have worked with in the past. Your firm very well may have a preferred vendor list that you can use until you start making your own connections. You'll form relationships with home inspectors and appraisers and attorneys and lenders and everybody involved. But until then, your firm might share, might have a preferred vendor list. Don't send your buyers to Google to find a home inspector. Do you know what they can find when they go to Google and search for a home inspector? Crap. So make sure if you have experience with somebody and you can recommend them, and that's all we're doing is recommended. I'm not guaranteeing their work. I'm not going to tell you they're, perfect and going to do a stellar job. I'm saying I've had a good experience and I recommend one of the home inspectors I recommend. Confidentiality of offers, we were just talking about. Again, I can't pit buyers together. So if you're working with two buyers that are interested in the same property, I can't share the terms that one buyer is going to make. That's nobody's business, is it? The only person that should know the terms of the buyer's offer should be the seller. The other thing this addresses, and this came up the last couple years when we were in these crazy multiple offer world, the listing agent also can't disclose the terms of other buyer's offers. So you have a multiple offer situation. Let's say you have 6 offers in your hand. You will get a call from an agent that says, what's the highest price offer in your hand? Can you share that information? Can you tell them I got an offer for 153? No, that's confidentiality of offers. We can't pit them together. Again, more on that coming when we get to license law and commission rule. Starting on page 4, we talk about dual agency as is explained to the buyer. We saw dual agency as explained to the seller in our listing agreement. Now we're going to see it again here as it is explained to the buyer. I think you guys should read this. The firm's role as a dual agent, the buyer's role, what this means for everybody to be a dual agent. And then we have to have the buyer initial. Either they authorize the firm to act as a dual agent, or they want exclusive representation and they do not authorize the firm to act as a dual agent. We've got to get them to initial one or the other, yes or no to dual. If you are a dual agent, the firm may charge a different commission for an in-house transaction. So we need to address that commission, dual agency commission. Again, when it comes to fees and commission and bonuses and referrals, guys, there are no secrets. We've got to disclose our monies to our principal. They hired us. They're the boss. They have a right to know. Any good contract is going to discuss what happens if we terminate or breach. So this is pretty much boilerplate. Surveillance. Again, we saw this in the listing agreement. The seller can have video. The owner can have video. They cannot have audio. You cannot record somebody's voice without their permission. However, I still have conversations with my buyers because I don't want my buyer walking around the house hurting their negotiating power. I don't want my buyer to give away their terms and let the seller accidentally hear this on video. So we have this conversation. Photographs and videos, buyers are sometimes encouraged to take pictures of the home, to take pictures of the space. They cannot take pictures of the stuff. Couple years ago, before this market we're in now, you might have been spending the whole day with a buyer on Saturday, taking them out on Saturday and showing them 13 properties. Schedule lunch somewhere in between, but that's a lot of homes to see in one day. Can we agree? And I'm telling you right now, if you look at 13 homes in one day, they all start running together. And your buyer gets home and they start piecemealing. They're like, this kitchen and that bedroom. It's like, no, you got to keep it together. So sometimes encouraging your buyers to take pictures or videos or notes to help them keep it separate. The seller has to specify if they don't allow pictures. If we don't know otherwise, then your buyer can take pictures. Again, please hear me, of the space. They can't hone in on the personal information. We're not there to look at the stuff. You may want to try to restart, Britt. It's weird. Wire fraud warning. We talked about wire fraud with the sellers. We talk about with the buyers. We talk about it with both in the offer to purchase and contract. This probably comes up more for buyers than it does for sellers, because buyers almost always have to bring money to closing. And when they bring money to closing, it's got to be readily available funds. No personal checks. The attorney may have a preference. The attorney may say cashier's check and or wire transfer. And if wire transfer is the route that we're going to go, we need to have a hard conversation with our buyers and make sure, look them in the eyeball and tell them, I will never email you wire transfer instructions. And if you ever get an email from me with wire transfer instructions, I need to know, because that means I've been hacked. That email with the wire transfer instructions is coming from the hacker. And you guys know what happens when you send it to that offshore bank. Is it gone? It is gone. There have been billions of dollars intercepted from buyers, never made it to the attorney. Could you imagine saving your whole life to buy a house, and then the day of closing, you lose that money and that property, unless you got the money laying around? So please have the conversation with your buyers. I'm never going to email it to them. Instead, what your buyer should do is call the closing attorney at a number that they independently obtain. Don't rely on a phone number in an email, because what if the hacker is sending you their phone number? So have the buyer look up the attorney's phone number, or you can give it to him over the phone. But don't rely on emails when it comes to anything money related. I got a place for 2 buyers to sign, print name, signature, and date, their contact information. If you have more than 2 buyers, then we have an additional signatures page, so you can add as many signatures as you need to. If your buyer is an entity, we have place for that information. And then the firm, we're going to print the name of the firm license number, and the office address. The individual agent is allowed to sign on behalf of the firm. We're general agents. The relationship we have with our firm is that of a general agent, which means we have some ability. And one of those abilities is to sign the agency agreement on behalf of the firm. Because we sign it, another must is we have to have our individual license number and your contact information. Buyer's agency agreement, not near as lengthy as the listed, but still some good information. I got one question I need to go back and grab. What other questions do I have about our buyer's agency agreement? So question comes in, situation where for sale by owner isn't wanting to pay the buyer's agent, and the buyer doesn't want to be represented. The buyer chooses to go as a customer. Do you not get any commission? Actually, in North Carolina, that relationship isn't allowed, because if you have a for sale by owner and a non-represented buyer, both are your customer, and that would be a transactional or facilitator broker back at the beginning of Unit 7. And in North Carolina, if you're involved in the transaction, somebody has to be a principal. It may not be your principal, but somebody has had to have hired a firm. So if we want to be involved, somebody, in that case, a for sale by owner and a non-represented buyer, somebody needs to hire you. One big reason why would be to ensure your commission. Britt, did that fix it? No, weird. Does anybody else have a humming noise? No? Okay. Maybe on break, log out, restart your whole device and come back in. That's the extent of my.
I have the humming noise going on, but it's
You
not that
do?
loud for me. Yeah, but
Okay,
it's
weird, weird. I got my mower out here right now, but he just got here, so he's right outside my window right now. All right. More of an echo. Here, let me try to turn my volume down just a hair. I don't know if that helps or not. You guys may need to adjust your volumes. If I ever play a video, remind me to crank it back up. That did help? Good. See? I know more than how to restart. I can adjust volume too. It says I'm not technical. All right, so the listing agreement we looked at. Now we've looked at our exclusive buyer agency agreement. Remember, the forms you have in your book are out of date. Don't even look in your book. Anytime you see a form in the book, immediately go to the online learning system. Fair enough? All right, so I got a question for you guys. Chat time. I want to hear from all of you, please. 1, 2, or 3. Hint, there might be more than one right answer. Ryan? All right, so an agent must have a buyer agency agreement signed. We got to have it in writing to sign it. Yes. So we got a written buyer agency agreement signed no later than the time we're ready to present an offer for the buyer on their behalf. Remember, also an oral buyer agency, we said we cannot demand exclusivity. Oral buyer agency is non-exclusive. The other thing we said is if we cannot, in an oral agreement, we cannot limit, we cannot set a specific period of time. So in an oral buyer agency agreement, I can't say you're going to work with me for 2 weeks or 2 months. If I attempt to set a period of time, or if I demand exclusivity, which is what number 3 is saying, then I got to get it in writing. If neither one of those happen, the latest I have is when I'm ready to present an offer for the buyer's behalf. First substantial contact is our working with real estate agent disclosure. Remember, there's agency agreements, and then there's the disclosure. Yeah, if I don't remember in for break, remind me again. I'm telling you, short-term memory. Which one is the best answer? Well, in this case, they're both. 2 and 3 are both right. So the latest we have to put our oral buyer agency agreement in writing is when we're ready to present an offer. But there's 2 caveats to oral buyer agency. One says I cannot demand exclusivity. The other one says I cannot require us to work together for a specific period of time. If neither one of those happen, then I can work with them until I'm ready to present an offer. You're not going to get this question on the test. This is just to get us thinking. Did I get you thinking? Obviously, for your test question, there's only one right answer. Questions? We already looked at this to finish up the content of Unit 8. This is where we ended on Thursday last week. So we talked about exclusively representing a buyer, but we have another option of working with them as a dual agency. Please understand, when we go into dual agency, exclusivity goes away. Because in dual agency, how many clients do I have? Dual agency, how many clients? We have 2. Can I offer exclusivity to both? What's the word exclusive mean? No. So in dual agency, exclusivity goes away. I think we all agreed there's a potential conflict of interest in dual agency. Guys, dual agency, everyone say it with me, is intentionally created with informed written consent. That was fun. Y'all want to say it with me again? Dual agency is intentionally created with what? Informed written consent. Undisclosed dual agency is not allowed. Undisclosed dual agency says I just start acting like a dual agency, like a dual agent, without having that conversation, without getting the consumer, the client to agree to it. So we're going to, I know we're just a few minutes early and I hate to do this, but next up, we're going to talk about commission math. And I really don't want to talk for 2 or 3 minutes and then take a break. So let's go ahead and take our break now. And then when we come back, y'all get your calculators. And when we come back, we're going to start on our commission math, and I'm going to grab you that YouTube video. So let's take 10. Welcome back. All right. So I am taking attendance. Morning. We're going to do some math, but not just any math. We're going to do commission math. Commission math is fun math, yes? I'm telling y'all blow my mind. You say, I'm no good at math. But once you get your license, that buyer calls you and wants to buy 123 Main Street, you will calculate in your head how much you're going to make when you sell that buyer 123 Main Street. When you affiliate with your firms, thank you for letting me know that you're back. Yes, we have taken attendance. When you affiliate with your firms, your firm will, obviously you'll know your commission split. The firm gets paid and then the firm shares their commission with you. How much of their commission do they share with you? Well, it's up to the firm's policy. So remember, I really do think you guys should shop around. I think you should talk to more than one firm, have something to compare and contrast. And obviously, one question on your list should be, what's your compensation split? So you have something to compare. Before we get into this, again, one more quick reminder. I think this is the last time we see this. But just a quick reminder on the terminology, the verbiage. Again, a lot of these commission problems are going to talk about the selling agent or the listing agent. So please make sure we hear those differences. We see those differences in the ings and the ers. The ing is the activity, the ing is the verb. So if you're selling the property, you are the one working with the buyer. If you're listing the property, you're the one working with the seller. The terminology absolutely matters. You guys have your phones? Of course we do. They're tethered to us, aren't they? If you have your phone, I'd like you to take a picture of this. We're going to talk about what all this means. If you don't have your phone, just do a quick screenshot. Something you can pull up and reference when we do our commission math. So take just a second and get this somewhere you can access it. And then we're going to talk about what all this means. But got it? Phone, screenshot, something. Please remember, you guys, you are not preparing to take a math test. You're preparing to take a real estate exam with some math in it. And I say all that to remind us that math is not our main priority. Math is not our main focus. You can get all the math wrong and still pass this test. So I don't want you guys to spend all of your study time in the math. However, I do think you should spend some of your study time in the math, because if you can get a couple points here and there on the math, and that could be the difference in pass or fail. So we're going to go through this. We're going to have the conversation. We'll do 1 or 2 problems together in class. And then I'm going to show you guys where I have plenty of practice for you guys to work on outside of class. So this is what I call the commission map. And what this does is it allows us to see what happens to the commission. It allows us to see what happens as this commission is split. So the top tier is always going to be the sales price or the total commission. Please hear me now. Every single one of these commission problems are different. And that's part of the reason why we give you practice. Some will give you the total commission, some will give you the sales price, and then ask you to find the total commission. They're all different. So again, the map is here to help us see what's happening to this commission. So we start at the top with the total. That total is then split between the 2 sides. So we got the listing side, the one working with the seller. We got the selling side, the one working with the buyer. The split between the sides may not always be 50-50, but the split between the sides need to total the total commission. Maybe it's a 50-50 split. Maybe it's a 30-70 split. Doesn't matter. The sides have to add up. And then once each side gets paid, once each firm gets paid, then that commission is split again between the firm and you. Again, that may not always be a 50-50 split, but you're taking the side that the firm got and you're splitting it between what the firm's going to keep and what they're going to give you. So again, if it's a 60-40 split, we're going to look at a T-bar sample in just a second. Again, you guys, all of these are worded different. So the T-bars may not apply to all. So that's where we're going to give you a sample, something to get started with. Because all problems are worded different is why I'm such a fan of the map. When you are working down the map, the problem starts, for example, and gives you total commission. And the question wants to know, what's the listing agent going to get paid? You would be working down the commission map. And the steps you take when you work down to get from here, to go from here to here, here to here, every tier or every step that you take, the steps that you're going to get there are going to be to multiply. So to find the total commission, you multiply. To find the side, you multiply. To find what the agent or the firm gets, you multiply. You may also see questions where they give you what the selling firm is going to retain. And the question may be, what's the sales price? So now we're working up the commission map. We start with the selling firm. We have to figure out what the side gets to get to the commission or the sales price. And the steps we take when we're working up are going to be to divide. Some of you like the T-bar when it comes to commission math. Some of you don't. It's one of those things you kind of need to play around with and see which one works best for you, which one clicks for you. I do recommend mapping it out so you can see the trail, so you can see the path. Please look with me in your book on page 242. 242. And on page 242, we have a commission map in action. So we can actually see, we start with a sales price of $189,000. There's a 6% commission, and you got the verbiage for all that in the paragraph above. So we got our sales price, and we determined, in this case, in this problem, we determined our total commission of $11,340. The problem tells us that the sides are on a 50-50 split, which means the listing side's going to get half, the selling side's going to get half. So we took that 11,340, divided it by 2, and we see that ABC Realty gets 5,670 and Homes Realty gets 5,670. Everybody with me? We took the total commission, and the first tier of the commission map said we split it between the sides. Then we take the commission of Homes Realty and we split it even further between the firm and the agent. This is a 55-45 split. Again, there's no standard. The problem has to tell you. So the firm's going to keep 45 of their 5,670. And they're going to give agent Ted 55% of the 5,670. Do you remember what the word of means in a word problem? If your commission is something of the side, what are you going to do? You're going to multiply. So that reinforces what we said. We went from here to here and then here to here. Every time you go down a tier, you got to pick up your calculator and multiply something. Every time you come up a tier, you got to pick up your calculator and divide something. And that's what the commission map does. It lays it out for you. It allows you to see the different tiers and the actions, so you know the steps that you want to take. These are multi-step problems, which means you got to pick the calculator up more than once for the most part. Always do what the problem tells you. We can use T-bars if you choose. I introduced these to you guys because I know we like T-bars. I know most of us like T-bars. If not, don't worry, I'll get you. But I do introduce the T-bars to you guys just so you can see that each tier, each time we come down or up, we got to use a T-bar. Honestly, I think it's easier to look at the map than it is the T-bars, but I do want to give you guys a T-bars in case you want to try. And again, see which one works best for you. So the first tier is going to look something like this, where we have to find the total commission. Again, it all depends on how the problem's stated. That's what that little asterisk means. Maybe the first step we're finding the total commission. Maybe the first step we're just finding the side. This is where practice with commission math comes into play, because the more different ways you can see it in practice, the better prepared you're going to be for your exam. Remember the basics of the T-bar. T-bar 101 says that the part over the whole, and the part is generally the smaller number. So when it comes to our commission and sales price, unfortunately for us, which one is smaller? Our commission. We're not going to make more than what you can sell the house for, right? So depending on how the problem's worded, the smaller number goes on top, the whole number goes, the bigger number, the whole goes on bottom. This is one tier. This is to get us to either the total commission or the side. And then the second tier is to take the side's commission and split it between. We're either finding the firm's commission or the agent's commission. So we just took the map and we put it in T-bar form. Both of your exams, my exam and the state exam, will allow you to have scratch paper. And I highly recommend you use a scratch paper, particularly when you see commission problems on both of your exams. Wow, did you hear what I just said? When you see commission problems on both of your exams, goodness, I recommend you use your scratch paper and you map it out. I think that's the easiest way to look at these, especially as you guys are learning. You may do enough practice, you get good enough, you don't need the map, but I do encourage you to start with the map so you can gauge it. Questions so far? And while you guys are asking questions, I need to stop sharing just for 1 second. But let me get your question. I got to get myself a whiteboard. All right, so let me come back and get you guys. Where did you guys go? Okay. Back. Everybody can see me again? Screen. Good, 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 good. Okay, so we're going to do one of these together. We're going to talk through, look at the map, talk through it. And then I got 1 or 2 for you guys to do as well. Kind of ease you into it. And like I said, once we get through this, then I'll show you where you can find plenty of practice. So let's look at one together. What's the very first thing that we do when we see a math problem? or any test problem for that matter, what's the very first thing we do? Just read it. Just read it. I swear y'all see math and you want to pick your calculator up and do something. But until you read the problem, you don't know what you're doing. So stop, breathe, and read. Kind of rhymes, doesn't it? Breathe and read. That's right. So the home is listed for 230,000, sells for 227,000 with a 6% total commission being charged. The listing firm is cooperating with the firm who produces a buyer by offering them 2.5% of the sales price. Based on this information, what is the listing side commission on the sale? Now note, on our commission map, we're only going down to the side. So this will just be a one-step problem. It's just easing us into it. You're going to have plenty of practice where you take that side split and split it between the firm and the agent. But in this case, always, well, any case, always focus on what the problem's asking. So what are we solving for in this case? All I care about is the side. So if we start by using our map, I got a home listed for 230 and it sells for 227. Do we get paid off of the list price or the sales price? We get paid off of the sales price. We get paid off of what it closes for. So right out the bat, we got a distractor. How do I know I have a distractor? Because we know our formulas. Because in this case, we know our map. So I'm starting the top of my tier. I'm starting with a sales price of 227,000, which is 6%, with a total 6% commission being charged. So the first step for the top is to find that total commission. So you have 227,000 times 6% gives me a total commission of 13,620. For my T-bar people, this first step would just look something like this. Sales price, you know, we need to multiply. What I'm solving for is the total commission. Questions so far? Now we need to split it. And this is where knowing that terminology, understanding these words matter. The listing firm, please remember, the seller pays the listing firm. The listing firm shares their commission with whomever brings the buyer. The agency agreement is between the seller and the listing firm. So the seller pays the listing firm agrees to share their commission. So the listing firm is cooperating with the firm who produces a buyer by offering them 2.5%. So what the listing firm is saying is that the selling firm is going to get 2.5%, right? Cooperating with the firm who produces a buyer by offering them 2.5% of the sales price. It looks like we did an extra step, but that's okay, because what we're doing is filling out the map. I'll explain more in 1 second. If the total commission is 6%, and we're going to give the selling firm 2.5%, share with me in a chat how much the listing firm is going to retain. Total commission is 6%. We're going to give away 2.5%. So share with me in a chat what the listing firm is going to get. Percentage. Look at you go. Percentage. So if the total commission, all we have to disperse is 6%. What's the total commission? 6%. I'm going to give you 2.5. So what's that leave me with? 3.5. What's 3.5 plus 2.5? And that's what we mean. The sides are not always a 50-50 split, but the sides need to total the top. This is not a 50-50 split. 6% is all we have to work with. So I'm going to give the selling firm 2.5. I keep what's ever left, which means the listing firm is going to retain 3.5%. Questions? So far? So, yes, you have a question?
Yes, I just want to know, I mean, I get that everyone, I guess share wouldn't be equal, but how exactly do we know, or how exactly do we get the 3.5%? That's what stumped me.
Sure, good question. Thank you. So we relied on the information in the problem. I know that the total commission is 6%. And I know I'm going to give you 2.5. So
Gotcha.
how we
Okay,
found that
perfect.
3.5% is the difference.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for asking. Okay. Now, we said earlier I took an extra step, and that's okay because I was just filling in the map as I go. And sometimes you're going to take an extra step, and it's okay. I can't solve this problem by looking at the total commission. I put it here just because that's what my map told me to do. And especially when I'm learning the map, I need to understand how it works. So the top tier looked at the sales price and the total commission. But now the problem says, what is the listing side commission? And note here, I'm going to erase this so we can see. Note here, you guys, what's the word of mean in a math problem? Multiply. So our commission is based off of the sales price. If the listing firm is getting 3.5%, that's 3.5% of the sales price. So back to our sales price of $227,000. We know you're getting 3.5% of the sales price. Up, down line means multiply, or if you're working down the commission map, as we are right here, we started at the top and we're working down. The step we take is to multiply. So some of you are doing, share with me in a chat. What's the listing side commission? The last step would just be to multiply. Because you're not doing it of the sales price. You're trying to do it of the total commission. But our commission is based off of the sales price. So sales price of 227,000 times 3.5%. It's that one word of that means a whole lot, isn't it? Especially in math. So now we multiply. On our not so smart calculators, we take 227,000 times 3.5%. And how much is the listing firm going to get? You're going to get $7,945. And that is the number that would go here. And then if the problem went on, which it didn't, but if it did, the problem went on, that's what we would split between the firm and the agent. This is just what the side is collecting, 3.5% of the sales price. Look at you guys already telling me what the selling firm's going to get. Yeah, could you figure out what the selling firm's going to get just by looking at this? Sure, absolutely. Just take the total, the sales price times 2.5%, and that's our side. And again, you could check yourself because 79.45 plus the selling side should equal the total commission. The sides equal the tier above it. Practice with the map. I encourage you to practice with the map. It's your visual, so you can see what's going on. Now remember, before you get excited, that's what the firm is going to collect. So you're not going to get a check for $7,945. Is everybody with me? You're not getting a check for this amount. This is what the firm is getting the check for. Then they got another split. What are you going to get? I don't know. It depends on your firm. Okay. Everybody got the map jotted down? Because it's your turn now. Use the map. So can I erase the pink? Is everybody good? I guess I should say, does anybody need me to keep it for another minute? I see heads bobbing. Okay, we're good. All right, now it's your turn. You can tell me in a private chat. Tell me about Elizabeth. Do the math. We got one more minute and then we're gonna talk about it. Okay. We see a problem. What's the very first thing we do? Just read it. Just read. Elizabeth lists a property for sale. Her firm has a written policy of charging 7% on all transactions. Listing firm has agreed they will cooperate with the firm that brings the buyer by offering them 3% of the total sales price. Elizabeth's commission split is 70% based on this information. How much commission will Elizabeth earn if the property sells for $285,000? Elizabeth is the listing agent. Do I have everybody so far? Elizabeth is the listing agent. Do I care about the buyer's agent? Not really in this problem, do I? Who do I care about? The listing agent. So there's your map. There's your tier. That's where our goal is. The top of it's going to be the sales price. She sells a house for $285,000. We know we have 7% commission, the top of our tier. And we know, we don't know how yet, we're just mapping it out, but we know somehow that commission is going to be split between the listing firm and the selling side, I should say, selling side and selling. So the first tier is to figure out the split. Shake your head yes or no. Is this a 50-50 split? No. Total commission 7%. We're going to give the selling side 3%, which means the listing side is going to keep how much for themselves? They're going to keep, they're going to keep 4. What's 4% plus 3%? 7%. Everybody with me so far? What questions do I have so far? We just figured out the sides percentage. Very good on how I got the 4% for the listing side. This is why I encourage you, practice with the map. Practice, practice, practice. Okay. So we know the listing side is getting 4% of the sales price. So the first tier, the first step we have to take, again, either you're a T-bar fan with this or you're not. So we'll do it both ways. The first step is to figure out how much the listing side is going to get. So we use our sales price in the bottom left. The side is getting 4% of the sales price. So there's the T-bar. If you like just calculations, no, 285 on your not so smart calculator times 4% means we have a side commission of $11,400. This is how much the firm's going to get when we sell this house. They're going to get 4% of the sales price. So the firm is going to collect $11,400. Questions here? The side is going to share their commission with Elizabeth. So now that we know how much the side is, then we need to take this split further. Now we got to take the side's commission and split it between the firm and Elizabeth. Back to the problem. Elizabeth's commission split. How much is Elizabeth going to get? She's going to get 70%. So Elizabeth's commission split is 70%, which just for fun, which means how much is the firm going to retain for themselves? If they're giving Elizabeth 70, then they're going to keep 30% for themselves. Yes? Doesn't 70 plus 30 equal 4% equal to 11,400? So now the last step, again, T-bar fan or not, got to pick our calculator up again. The last step is to take the side's commission, and figure out Elizabeth's split. The side is giving up 70% of their commission. So my non-T-bar, the side's commission times 70%, we're working down, so we multiply. Don't need a T-bar to know this. You're working down, you multiply. 11,400 times 70% means Elizabeth's payday. The check that's going to be made out to Elizabeth is $7,980. And that's the answer we were looking for. So Elizabeth, yes, is going to get $7,980. I know you just met the map, but so far, how do we feel about the map? Does it give you the visual? Does it kind of give you the guide for where to go, what to do, how to split it? I do encourage you guys to, obviously there's other ways to do it. I think the map is the most user friendly. Bottom line, you guys, I don't care how you get to 7,980. You find your own way to do it, fantastic. Just get to 7,980. All you got to do is show me on the test, A, B, C, or D. I don't want to see your work. I just want to see the right answer. Questions? I know a couple of you said interpreting the problem. I hear you. This is a big problem. This is a long problem, which is remember to read first and then break it down. Break it down using your map. Draw out your map and just start filling in what you can from the problem to figure out where the blanks are. Questions? I have a question for you guys. If you didn't get it right, do you see where you went wrong? And you don't have to answer that out loud. Ask that to yourself. If you didn't get it right, do you see where you went wrong? Remember, we're recording, so you have the ability to go back at your own pace. You can pause me when we're recording, rewind, all that good stuff. Here's another one. Tell me in a private chat about Julie's real estate shop. We got one more minute and then we'll talk about it. Ben? Okay, so this one says Julie's Real Estate Shop is listing a property for sale with an agreement from the seller to pay 6% of the sales price. Listing firm agrees to compensate the selling firm with 40% of the total commission when they procure that ready, willing, and able buyer. How much will Julie's Real Estate Shop collect on the transaction if the home sells for $300,000? Evidently, Julie's Real Estate Shop does not care about paying her agents. We just want to know how much is Julie's Real Estate Shop is going to get. Julie's Real Estate Shop is acting as the listing firm. I would ask myself that first. What side do we care about? Listing side or selling side? Everybody with me so far? The listing firm is who we care about. Top of my tier, I know it's sold for $300,000. I know the total commission is 6%. And in looking at the problem, I also know that the listing side, let's see, the listing firm agrees to compensate the selling firm with 40%, which means how much is Julie's Real Estate Shop going to keep? What's the listing side going to get? See your mouths move? So we're going to get 60% of what? Of the total commission. So how the firms get paid is of the total commission. At this point, do I know the total commission? Do I know that number? Not yet, right? So what's the first thing I need to do? I need to find that total commission. T-bar people, going to look like this, 300,000. Total commission is 6%. So in our not so smart calculators, we take 300,000 times 6%, and we get a total commission of $18,000. That's what our total commission is. Questions so far? The seller's going to pay Julie's Real Estate Shop $18,000. Of that $18,000, Julie's going to give 40% to the one that brings that ready, willing, and able buyer. So then the next step, the last step in this case, we need to figure out of that total commission, what is 60%? Total commission is 18,000. I'm going down, so I know I need to multiply. That could help with T-bar placement too. And I do have some practice for you guys working up. But I think you're more apt to see this type of problem on your exams. Up, down line means multiply. So we take 18,000 times 60%. Which means Julie's real estate shop is going to keep $10,800. Depending on this compensation split, if the problem went on, then we would take that 10,800 and split it one more time between the firm and the person acting as the listing agent. So total commission that Julie's real estate shop is going to collect, $10,800. Questions? Practice, practice, practice. Practice. I do say again, this isn't a math test. I know some of you are better at math than others. If math isn't your thing, maybe you focus on some of the math and just not worry about all of it. If that's the route you're going to go, I think commission math should be some of the math that you focus on. Because I'm telling you, you're going to see it. So if you can spend some time with it and practice, you might get yourself that extra point that you need. Y'all know there's a difference in 1 point from pass and fail, right? So this might be questions. Can I erase the pink? Everybody good if I erase? Everybody have this? We're recording. When we look at the commission map, this is typically, not always, but this is typically how the residential sales agent is paid. Property management's paid a little bit differently. We'll talk about that when we get to property management. But the commercial sales agent may be paid a little bit different. And with commercial sales agent commission math, it's not in your book at all. So we're going to go over it right now. And I've got plenty of practice for you guys outside. And unfortunately, when figuring out the commission agents, the commercial agents commission, I don't really have a formula. So we're just going to kind of throw you in the deep end. Everybody ready? Hold your nose. We're getting ready to go. Commercial agent commission is generally calculated with something called graduated commission. Graduated commission is in the syllabus. The real estate commission says if it's in the syllabus, it could be a good candidate for your state exam. So somebody just asked me, is it going to be on the test? It's on a syllabus. So could you be tested on graduated commission? Yes. Please trust the system. The best way I know how to do graduated commission math is just to do it. So first, let's just read the problem. Firm pays their brokers a commission based on the graduated sales commission plan. Per the agreement, the firm will pay $500,000 commission on the first $200,000 of the sales price. I'm sorry, 5% on the first $200,000, 3% on the next $200,000, and 1% on any amount over that. How much commission will the firm receive if the sales price is $900,000? So to do graduated commission, we got to start at the top with the sales price. The problem says we're going to pay 5% on the first 200,000. So we're going to pull out just 200,000 and pay 5%. We're going to pay 3% on the next 200,000. So let's pull out another 200,000. And then 1% on any amount over that. I've pulled out the first 200, I've pulled out the second 200,000. What do we have left? 900 minus 200 minus 200 tells us the amount left is what? 500,000. And we're going to charge 1% on that. We started with the sales price. We pulled out the first 200,000, paid you 5% on the first 200,000. Then we pulled out the next 200,000, paid you 3% on that. And then 1% any amount over that, in this case, 500,000. Graduated sales commission. You guys want to take it from here? Yeah, that looks like fun. Why don't you guys take it from here? How much commission will the firm receive on the sales price? You got one more minute. So to find this commission, again, we started with the sales price. I paid you 5% on the first 200,000. I paid you 3% on the next 200,000, and I paid you 1% on anything over that. So the difference, 900 minus 200 minus 200 gives us $5,000. So now we just got to pick our calculator up. $200,000 times 5% equals $10,000. 200,000 times 3% equals $6,000. And 500,000 times 1% equals 500,000. So how much commission is the firm going to collect? You add them all up, and we get $21,000. Again, if there were an agent involved, if this problem involved an agent, then we would take that 21,000 and split it between the firm and the agent. Welcome. Graduated commission. Again, you're not going to find it in your book. Please stop looking. But I do have some practice for you guys. Questions? You second guessed yourself, didn't you? We like to do that too, don't we? Sometimes we got to take a long way to get there to learn, you know? Y'all think Michael Jordan was amazing the first time he picked up a basketball? How do you think Michael Jordan got to be who he is today? Practice, practice, practice. God, I can't. If I ever got a chance to interview Michael Jordan, my number one question for him would be, how many hours did you spend in your driveway learning how to dribble? How many hours did you spend just on dribbling a dang basketball? It starts with the fundamentals, doesn't it? And that's what we're doing. Be the Michael Jordan of commission math. How about that? I'm going to show you when we're done. I'm going to show you where I have plenty of practice for you guys. Absolutely. You never have to worry if I'm going to give you practice when it comes to math. The answer to that is always yes, because that's how you get it. Y'all could watch me. We could do 20 more of these and y'all could watch me do it. But guess what? How you're going to learn. I got to cut the strings, don't I? All right. All the math that we covered, of course I am. I'm going to show you some practice on the commission map. I'm going to show you some practice on graduated commission. And when we come back from break, I'm going to introduce you to Stellar Net Math, and I will have practice on that as well. I promise, always. All right, speaking of break, we need to take a break. When we come back, we got to talk about Stellar Net Math. And y'all grab your phones, because after that, we're going to Kahoot. So we're going to finish up our math, and then we're going to Kahoot. Please take 10. Welcome back. All of you guys outside. Ugh. I'll be out there this afternoon. I got a new weed whacker, so I got a new toy to go play with. So excited. All right. I am going to take attendance. And Unit 8 has two pieces of math. There's commission math that we just talked about. The second piece of math in Unit 8 is what's referred to as seller net. So let me ask you guys a question. Do you think it's common when you're preparing for a listing? Do you think it's common for the seller to look at you and say, when you sell my house for X amount, how much am I going to get paid? How much am I going to get? Do you think that's a common question for sellers? Yeah. Why are they probably selling a house? To get money. So they want to know how much are they going to get paid, and that's what seller net helps us determine. Please listen to me. This is not about your commission. We've already figured out your commission. You guys like to blend this together. You guys always like to ask, well, what about me? If I'm putting this amount in the seller's pocket, how much am I going to get paid? You know how to calculate your commission. This is just on the seller. So I think when we talk about seller net, I think one thing that can help you guys is to put on your seller hat. Put yourself in the shoes of the seller. So who do you care about? You care about you and how much you're going to get. Seller net. Nothing to do with commission. Do I have everybody so far? I got to undo what I think you. All right. So seller net. I do like the T-bar for seller net. I will give you just a second to jot this down or take a picture or whatever, and then we're going to talk about what all this means. Okay, so the T-bar looks, again, a couple different things. Seller net is also calculated of the sales price. We're going to learn in just 1 minute that sales price is divvied two ways. It's divvied between the seller and the listing firm. So both of us are paid of the sales price. We're talking about seller net. We're just focusing on our seller hat up. The number that goes on top is going to be all of the seller's debits. Now we're going to talk about what some of those debits are in just a second. We're going to get more into when we go to closing in Unit 21. So the number on top is the seller's debits, all of their closing costs, all the money that they have to pay to sell their home, everything except commission. Commission does not go on top. I will get you paid in just a minute, I promise you. The number on top does not include commission. So we have our seller's debits plus their net. Seller's net is how much are we going to put in their pocket when it's all said and done. Once everybody's been paid, including me and you. Remember our lien priority? And we placed everybody in line, who was going to get paid when, and we had the seller way at the end. The seller is the last one to get paid. And what the seller gets is what's left after they pay all their debits. That's the seller net. The seller's rate is the seller's percentage. When we think about seller's rate, we can talk about pie. Y'all like pie? Right here at lunchtime? That's kind of mean. Let's pretend that this piece of pie represents the entire sales price. This whole pie represents the sales price. I just said there are pretty much two people that get paid from the sales price, the listing firm and the seller. So if the whole pie represents the sales price, if the firm's commission is, I'm making a number up, 5%, that means the seller is giving the firm a piece of their pie. If the seller is giving the firm a piece of their pie, tell me in a chat what's left for the seller. The entire pie represents 100%. And of my 100%, I'm giving you 5. So what's left for the seller? %100 minus 5 means the numbers that goes here is 95%. The seller's rate is 100% minus the commission. The seller's rate is 100% minus the commission. Why don't we write that down? The seller's rate equals 100% minus the commission. What questions do I have so far? The seller's rate is 100% minus the commission. So 100% represents the whole pie. The seller's giving you 5%, which means they have 95% of the sales price to pay all of their debits. And whatever's left is what they're going to walk away with. Good so far. That's what we're doing with this T-bar. Everybody have your formula. By the way, all formulas go on a flashcard or your piece of paper dedicated to formulas. There's your formula. Some of the seller's debits. Again, we're going to talk about more when we get to Unit 21. But the seller's debits, we've already said the seller typically pays commission. We said in Unit 5, the seller pays excise tax. If you don't remember excise tax, please make yourself a note to go back and review it in Unit 5. And another one of the seller's debits is the deed preparation fee. The attorney has to prepare the deed for closing. They have to prepare the deed for the seller to convey it to the buyer. And while the buyer pays the attorney's fees, the seller pays to have their own deed prepared for closing. I always remember it this way. When we're getting ready for closing, the attorney prepares the deed. It's still the seller's deed, so they get to pay for it. I've always said, if you guys know your alphabet, you can remember CDE, commission, deed prep, and excise tax. In addition to CDE, we have the rest of the seller's debits, such as their outstanding liens, any payoff amounts for mortgages that they may have. Did they agree to do any repairs? Did they agree to pay any closing costs? Any money coming out of the seller's pocket, including in addition to CDE, will be the seller's debits. Everything they owe at closing, except commission. Back to our T-bar. And then the other thing we said, again, more on this in Unit 21, we're just easing you in. The other thing we said is the seller's rate. The seller's rate represents the entire, the pie represents the sales price. The whole pie equals the sales price. The seller's rate is the sales price minus the commission. So that number that goes in the T-bar. The seller is giving the firm a piece of their pie, which means the seller's going to retain whatever's left. Everybody have the T-bar jotted down, or picture or something in front of you. All right. I'm just throwing y'all in on this one. Tell me in the chat. Maybe. There we go. You got one more minute. What do we do first? Do we freak out a little bit and say, oh my God, I don't know what to do? Breathe. Everybody breathe. Breathing's important. Anybody else do yoga? I just started doing yoga a couple years ago. You know what I know about yoga? Teaches you how to breathe. All right. So we're just gonna breathe and read. The property owner wishes to net 56,500 from the sale of her small building. She needs to pay off her existing mortgage of 115,000, and she's got 12,500 in outstanding liens. Erica, that's a great point. Thank you. Sellers agreed to pay the listing firm a 7% commission. What is the minimum price this property must sell in order for the seller to net 56,500? And I think I just had my aha moment. So again, I thank you. We don't worry about things such as excise tax unless the problem specifically says excise tax. So we're only going to do, and I think I just had my aha moment because I was trying to figure out where some of these numbers are coming from. So thank you. Only do what the problem tells you. If it doesn't mention excise tax, then don't worry about it. If it doesn't mention liens and net and loans and all that other stuff, you only do what the problem tells you. Do I have everybody so far? Okay, thank you. We know that the owner wants to net 56,500. And what I mean by that is once this thing closes, the deed changes hands, all of the seller's debits are paid, our commission is paid, and the check that we're going to put in the seller's hand for selling their house is, or their small building, is 56,500. That's what seller net is. How much are they going to get when it's all said and done? This seller tells you at your listing appointment, this is how much I want to make. I want to make $56,500. Do I, as the listing agent, now have a material fact on my hand? Do I have something that's of specific importance to my seller? And if it's important to my seller, then who else is it important to? Me. So doesn't it become my responsibility to make sure that I can put, this is a pretty specific number, right? This seller isn't just saying, I got to sell, pay me. This seller is saying, I wish to net 56,500. So the first thing we need to do, we've read the problem, dissected it a little bit. I know I can use a T-bar, so why not go ahead and throw that down? The problem wants to know what is the sales price. So my X is the sales price. That's what I'm solving for. This is the minimum. What's the minimum I can sell the house for, pay off her debt, pay your commission, and still put $56,500 in the seller's pocket? The number that goes on top of the T-bar is the seller's net plus all of their debits, everything except commission. And we're only going to focus on what the problem gives us. So I have a net of 56,500. We got an outstanding mortgage of 15,000. And we have other liens of 12,500. And when we add all that up, we get the seller's debits and their net of $184,000. This is what they owe, plus what they want to keep. All of their debits, their net, everything but commission. Questions on how I got the $184,000? Now we got to figure out the seller's rate. And when we're figuring out the seller's rate, we can always think about pie. The whole pie representing the sales price. Of that piece of pie, the seller is given the firm a very small slither. So if they're going to give the firm 7%, what's the seller's rate? The whole pie minus the commission means the seller's going to get what's left. So the seller's rate is going to be 93%. Questions on how I got these two numbers, the 184,000 for the top, the 93% for the seller's rate. That fourth line on the T-bar means divide. So we take 184,000 on your not so smart calculator, divide it by 93%, which means I have a minimum, hear me say minimum, sales price of 184,000 divided by 93%. The minimum I can sell their house for, or small building, give or take. So 197,852, give or take. Now, let's talk about what that number means. This is the minimum sales price. At this point, as the listing agent, this is where I need to start looking at those comps that we briefly mentioned, that we're going to talk more about in Unit 17. So we need to look at those comps to make sure that I can sell this house for $197,852. The comps are going to give me an idea of what other things, similar properties in that area are selling for. So we know what I have to sell it for to put $56,500 in the seller's pocket. But now I need to go crunch some numbers and look at some comps. And what if I pull some comps and I'm finding the average sales price in this neighborhood is 145,000 to 152,000. 152. There we go. Did I do that again? 52. Do you think I can sell her house for 197? When I got numbers looking at me telling me that the average sales price is between 145 and 152. So before we get excited and say, yeah, I can do that, no problem, we need to look at some numbers. We need to pull some comps and make sure that I can sell their house for 197. Because guys, here's the deal. The seller's got to pay the $115,000 for existing mortgage. The seller has to pay the $12,500 in outstanding liens. The seller has an agency agreement with the firm saying you're going to pay me 7%. So if I don't sell her house for $197,853, the seller's not going to get $56,500. Because that doesn't change the fact that they still owe that debt. They still owe that commission. Does this make sense? So anything less than that comes out of seller net. Do I have a happy seller? No. What if I sell her house for more than $197,852? What if I sell it for $200,000? That's more money that the seller will get. That's what we mean by minimum. If I want to put $56,500 in the seller's pocket, the minimum I can sell their house for is $197,852.68. Again, more on comps. We're getting there in Unit 17. Questions on seller net? So you're not going to miss a problem by rounding alone. So in other words, the answer choices aren't so close that if you round differently than I do, remember your test is going to give you multiple choice. So you'll be able to look at the answer choices and see which one's the closest. They say for the most accurate number, go out at least 3 decimal places before you round. I'm not sure how you, might have just been a typo because we didn't have to really round anything. But if you don't get the exact penny, it's okay. It's okay. Your answer choice will be close enough. You'll be able to figure it out. That's right. So excise tax back in Unit 5. You take the purchase price divided by 500 and you round up to the nearest whole dollar. Please go back and review that. Here's the good news. We're done with math again for a couple weeks. Well, a couple classes, I should say, a couple classes. So that gives you guys about a week and a half to get this commission map. Is that fair? We're breaking the math down for you. My other option be to introduce you to it all at once, all the math, and say, here you go. So we're breaking it down and we're giving you guys opportunity to go back and practice, practice, practice. Practice, practice, practice. Yes, so let's talk about, oh, you guys are ready for this practice. My goodness. So where do we get the practice for Unit 8 math? All right, as promised. First off, to wrap up Unit 8, there's your key terms. Remember, this is not a math test. So to wrap up Unit 8, remember the rest of Unit 8. There's his key terms at the beginning. That key point review on page 243, a nice summary, nice little checklist. And then you have your student quiz at the end of 248, and there is some math on this student quiz on page 248. And then we have the math concepts, pages 242 to 243. This goes over the math, except that graduated commission. This goes over the math that we just did, seller net. Commission map on 242 that we looked at. And then there's those 50 problems in the back of the book, starting on page 803. These are the numbers of the 50 problems in the back of the book that relate to the math that we just did in Unit 8. So your commission map practice and your seller net. So jot these numbers down, practice, practice, practice. I think of those 50 problems in the back of the book as kind of like the 201. So start with the end of the unit and build your way up to the 50 problems in the back of the book. So these are the numbers that relate to the math we just did. Everybody writing these down? Several of you just asked me for practice, but I don't see you writing. So I hope we're relying on the video. Everybody good? We got these? But wait, there's more. Okay. If we look in the online learning system, under the Unit 8 material, here's a commission and seller net math worksheet. This has both with the commission map and with the graduated commission. This also has seller net. I'm in Unit 8 in the online learning system. I have the solutions for you guys. So when you get stuck, I got the map for you. We got it all worked out. And then also in Unit 8, I have additional commission math. This is giving you practice working up the commission tree. Remember, the steps you take to go up are to divide. So this additional commission math is giving you that practice. There's going to be some math in the Unit 8 quiz. As you guys work through this, you're going to see some of that there. And then this is just reminding you about those 50 problems in the back of the book. So you got the end of the unit, you got the back of the book, and you got the online learning system. Is that a good place for you guys to get started? And remember, you have me too. So if you get stuck on something, take a picture of your work and send it to me. I can usually help you get unstuck, but I need to see what you see. I was going to say questions on Unit 8, but you know what? Questions on agency. I know there's a lot of questions on agency, which is why I need you guys to keep going back and reviewing agency. Guys, we are officially moving on for agency, but I need you guys to keep going back and reviewing. I mean it when I say none of you are agency experts right now. How you get good at agency is you go over it over and over and over again. I do think there is some power to repetition, which is where that YouTube channel comes into play. You can listen to it over and over and over again. The more times you hear it, the more times you read it, the several different resources I've given you guys about agency better help you wrap your brain around it. But good? Enough? Perfect. All right, let's cap off agency. Let's Kahoot. Y'all want to Kahoot? Grab your phones. And this Kahoot is our agency Kahoot. So this is from unit 7 and 8. There is your QR code. Point. Take you straight to the website. Don't even need a game pen. You are going to the site or you're using the app, you need a game pen. This game pen is 43816. Remember, if you don't want to Kahoot, you don't have to. I'm not going to make you. But if you don't want to play on your phone, please at least play in your mind. Guess what, guys? If you're not getting Kahoot right, are you prepared for the end of class exam? Probably not. So use this as a gauge. See how we're doing. Everybody in that wants to play? Don't let your phone go to sleep. Everybody in? Anybody not in? I guess I should ask that wants to play. All right. Let's Kahoot. Agency 7 and 8. Question number 1. A broker is permitted to represent both the seller and the buyer in the same transaction when ten seconds. Broker can represent both. Good job, guys. What do we know about dual agency? Both parties have to give us informed written consent in order to practice dual agency. The BIC doesn't pick. Doesn't matter where the commission comes from. If the agent is acting as a subagent, please write this down. If you're acting as a subagent, the buyer is your customer. How many customers are in dual agency? How many customers are in dual agency? 0. Why? Because we have how many clients? 2. So subagency is not representing both buyer and seller. Questions on this one? Let's see who got it right the fastest. Nugent was out fast, followed by Nyla and Taylor, Ashley and Joe. Quick draw. Question number 2. Which of the following is true? Ten seconds. which is true. This is one of the better responses. Let's turn to page 149. Page 149, we talked about the universal agent. Let's just go ahead and say this. This is a strong statement, but you know what? In a real estate transaction, you're not going to have a universal agent. Remember, the relationship is between the client and who? The firm. Are you going to give Coldwell Banker full power of attorney over you? Would you? Absolutely not. So the universal agent is full power. It's not going to exist. The general agent has some power. Examples that we gave of the general agent are the relationship between the property manager and the owner. The also example of general power or general agent, some power, is the broker's relationship with their firm. And then the last tier, the sales agent, is the special agent. The sales agent doesn't have any power. And again, this is the sales agent. This is the one working with buyers and sellers. Can I make anybody as a special agent do anything? Can I force their hands? Can I make them do a thing? I'm a fact finder. As a sales agent, I'm a fact finder. I provide the information so they can make the decision. Questions on this one? Yeah, on page 149. Universal, general, and special. So let's see, Nugent stayed on top. Joe came up, Sid came up. Ashley and Taylor are still on the board. Whoever you are with the ice cream cone on your head, you're up. Oh, that's Peter. I see that now. Peter's our highest climber. I guess I was just attracted to the ice cream cone. Question number 3, and I've given you more time. A listing agent knows about a problem with the roof and does not disclose to potential buyers. This agent is guilty of. You have 60 seconds. Take your time. Three seconds. Let's break this down. Good job, though. Let's break this down. The listing agent knows. Is that willful or negligent? They know. They know there's a problem. They know about a problem with the roof, and they do not disclose. Did they lie about it? No, they omitted it. They kept their mouth shut. They know and they do not disclose. This agent is guilty of willful omission. Had they lied? If they're lying, a buyer looks at them and says, is there a problem with the roof? And the agent responds and says, is that a lie? There's your misrepresentation. They know and they do not disclose. Questions on this one? That was good. Remember, you got examples, both in Unit 7 and in those comments of License Law and Commission Rule that I've asked you guys to start reading in preparation for the end of the class. So I like the examples because this, I mean, they're going to give you a scenario. on your test, and they're going to ask you A, B, C, and D. So we need to be able to interpret those scenarios. Questions on this one? See what we got. Nugent's not budging. He's the one to beat. Ashley came up. Sid's still on. Joe and Taylor, excuse me. Anna is our highest climber, up 12 places. Here's another one where I've given you more time. You have 60 seconds, so take your time. Which of the following statements is true about agency representation? Eight seconds. Which of the following is true? Look at you guys go. BP and the BIC can be in dual together. Because remember, it's not the individual that's in dual. Who's in dual? It's the firm. What the PB and BIC can't be is in designated dual agency. They cannot be designated opposite of each other. They can be in dual, but they cannot be designated. You can have, let's see, this mustard color one. You can have two PBs in dual, because again, dual agency, when you see the word dual, think about the firm. Dual is about the firm. So two PBs can be in dual. They cannot be designated. That's what's wrong with this one. And they can be PB and a full broker. The only caveat to designated is the PB and the BIC can't be designated opposite of each other. Any other relationship is allowed as long as we don't have prior confidential information about the other side. By the way, y'all have my last class to thank for this because they said Kahoot was too easy, so I had to up the game. So if you want to get mad at anybody, you get mad at my January, February class. Fair enough? The people have spoken. All right, questions on this one? Let's see what this did. Kitchen staying on top. Sid came up. SV came up, Taylor came up, and Katie came up. Desi's our highest climber, up 6 places. Win, thank you. Win? If I'm saying your name wrong, please let me know. I apologize. Question number 5. Working with real estate agent disclosure must be given, and you only get 30 seconds. Eight seconds. Working with real estate agent disclosure must be given to consumers in sales transactions. That's the key word there. What's wrong with this one? To all buyers, it's kind of late after we've hit for substantial contact, isn't it? So ideally, in a perfect world, we want to stop this conversation, stop learning information, or do our disclosure, I should say, before we hit for substantial contact. And if we hit, that's when we say, please stop talking. Please stop talking. That's when we got to interrupt them. Do not let them talk and then say, oh, by the way, I got to share that with my seller. Does that seem fair? So after first substantial contact is too late. Tricky, tricky. I get it. Every single word means something. Every single word means something. Questions on this one? Let's see, we got, if I'm saying it right, Wynn still on top. That's the one to beat right now. Sid still number 2. Taylor came up. Rosie C came up. And SV is on fire this round. We got an answer streak of 5. And a listing agreement may be terminated for any of the following reasons, except. Ten seconds. Listing agreement can be terminated for any of the following reasons, except, good job, guys. If the agent's license goes inactive. Why? Because the listing agreement is between the seller and who? The firm. If the listing agent license goes inactive, the show goes on. They'll just reappoint somebody else. If the listing agent passes away, the show goes on. We will just get somebody else to finish this transaction. Questions on this one? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Look at what just happened. So Sid's on top now. Wynn, you got some work to do this last round. Taylor's still on, Rosie C and SV. Asia is our highest climber, up 6 places this round. You should see the little summit on your phone. And the last one, all of the following are typical provisions of the listing agreement, except. Ten seconds. All the following are typical provisions except what we owe the buyer. The listing agreement is between the firm and who? The seller. What's the listing agreement have to do with the buyer? Absolutely nothing. So our listing agreement, it has to include the price of the property. This concerns me a little bit. I cannot ask the seller to sign the listing agreement if we haven't decided on the asking price. So that is a big part of our listing agreement, how much you're going to be paid, and then the firm's responsibilities. So what you're not going to see in the listing agreement is any responsibilities that we owe the buyer. Questions on this one? All right, here's our final podium. Let's see what we got here. A 3rd place winner this round is Sid. Good job. Our 2nd place is SV. And our 1st place winner is Lynn, came back. I got 4th and 5th runners up of Taylor and Katie. Remember, whenever we Kahoot, you guys have a reason to go out this afternoon and get a candy bar or whatever you want to do to treat yourself. Sound good? Sound good. Questions? All right, take a last break. Shake agency off. We come back, jump into contracts. Let's take 10. We ready to move on from agency? Yay. You know what else is heavily tested? Contracts. Please remember, I've been saying units 7, 8, 9, and 10 are heavily tested. So I'm taking attendance, cameras are on, and I can see you. And I just got one quick reminder before we jump into it. Please remember, in the online learning system, we have our own Campbell folder. I know a couple of you have asked where my PowerPoints are, so everything is down here in the Campbell folder. But don't forget too, we also have a tentative schedule. So I do want to remind us, the last day of class is May 23rd. We're a little over a month away. That is test day. I will talk about the final exam later. It is way too early to talk about it right now. But just make a note that the last day of class is the test day. Also, please remember, the Saturday before your final exam is a free cram course. So if you don't have this date and time in your calendar yet, please go ahead. Again, we'll send more information out as we get closer, but I do want you guys to have this date. So cram course, this would be the Saturday before your exam. Good opportunity to get some information crammed at you. And then the other date I want to remind you about is our retake. If you don't pass the exam on the 23rd, but you make at least a 50%, you don't pass, but you make at least a 50%, you are eligible for the retake, which is May 25th. Again, more information on that stuff coming. I just need you guys to have these dates. So please remember to do that. I'll remind you when we flip the calendar again as well. Questions about our tentative schedule? Okay. Moving away from agency, we jump into contracts. Unit 9 is our basic contract laws. Everybody see that word basic? Everybody see that? Guys, first year law students spend like an entire semester with basic contract law. You and I are going to blow through it in like an hour and a half. We'll start it today. We'll finish it up first thing on Thursday. We are not here to be attorneys. We are not here as law students. We are real estate agents. We're here to be agents. But we deal with contracts every single day. Our agency agreements are contracts. Our offer to purchase and contract is a contract. So even though we're not soon to be attorneys, we're not in law school, we need a basic understanding of how these things work. Unit 9 is not specific to real estate. Unit 9 is just basic contract law, how a contract works. When we get into Unit 10, we'll get into specifics of real estate. So we're just going to introduce you to it right now. Again, we'll start it today. We'll have it finished probably by the first break on Thursday, and then we'll be able to move on into Unit 10. The key to Unit 9 is the vocabulary words. So I'll remind you, of course, at the end, but please pay attention to those words on page 253, because that's what we're doing, is looking at the words. That's right. You absolutely do. And we will talk about that when we leave, of course. So basic contract law. In this unit, we're going to discuss this, that. We're just that. We're going to define the words that make that basic contract law. We're going to talk about those essential elements of a contract. Remember, we talked about the essential elements of a valid deed, and those essential elements of the valid deed in Unit 5 told us what the judge was looking for to determine if it was a valid deed. Well, we also have essential elements of a contract. If a contract is taken to a judge, are they going to determine it valid? And that's where we're going to look at these essential elements. And then we're going to define just some basic contract concepts. So the very first thing we need to do, the very first word we need to define when we're talking about basic contract law is What the heck is a contract? Now, I have no shame to my game, copy and paste straight from page 254. So if you don't want to write all this down, it is the second paragraph on page 254. A contract is a legally enforceable promise or set of promises between legally competent parties supported by legal consideration to do or refrain from doing a legal act that must be performed and for which the law provides a remedy if a breach or a promise occurs. I've highlighted the common theme. Do we see the common theme about a contract? It's legal, isn't it? The people are legal, the promise is legal, the contract is legal, the consideration is legal. It's a legally enforceable promise between two parties, which means if either party doesn't do what they promised to do, or does something that they didn't promise to do, they could be in breach. Contracts are very specific. They spell out the terms. There shouldn't be much room for confusion or interpretation. Contracts are very clear, and the parties going into contracts should be clear about what they're entering into. Again, we've talked about our agency agreements. Our agency agreements are a contract. They're a contract between the principal and the firm. Unit 10 is getting into our sales contract, the legally binding contract between the buyer and the seller. So contracts are legal. Contracts are also voluntary, which means you can't force somebody to enter into a contract. Can't make anybody do anything. The contracts are voluntary. Contracts include agreement or a promise. There's got to be something in exchange, some kind of agreement, term, promise. Contracts are between legally competent parties, which means they must be viewed by the court of law as capable of making a legally binding promise. We'll talk about what happens in just a second if the judge determines that either party is not legally competent. Contracts have to be supported by some kind of legal consideration. We're going to see this again and again and again, but I think it's important to go ahead and address this now. Consideration for a legally binding contract means something of value in exchange for that agreement or promise. There's no such thing as a free promise. So in exchange for the agreement or the promise, there's got to be something of value. And most of the time it's money. But remember, in basic contract law, it's anything of value. Is an agreement in exchange for free rent for 6 months something of value? Is free rent something of value? Heck yeah. What about an agreement in exchange for a tank of gas? Is that something of value? What about an agreement in exchange for 6 goats? Is that something of value? So we tend to think money, which is part true, but it's something of value. And the fact that there are no free promises, there's got to be some form of legal consideration, something of value for that agreement or promise. And then contracts also have to be for a legal act. You cannot have a legally binding contract for an illegal purpose. That makes sense, yes? So if my drug dealer shorted me on my stash this week, can I take him to court? Or her? Can I take them to court? No, because my drug dealer is probably not acting in a legal manner. Everybody with me? Legal act. I don't have a drug dealer, by the way, you guys, but a legal act for a legally binding contract. Starting on page 254 is where we really start defining words. First 2 words we've already seen a couple times. We are once again comparing something that's expressed to something that's implied. Specific to contracts, express means that the terms have been clearly stated. Maybe they have been stated on paper in a written agreement. Maybe they have been stated orally. That doesn't matter when it comes to express. What matters when it comes to express is that the terms have been stated. Compare express to implied. An implied contract just means it's demonstrated by your actions. You just start acting like you've had the conversation. You just start acting like you've stated the terms. So express versus implied, same thing with agency. Express contracts are all we can deal with. We cannot deal with implied anything. When you guys see implied on your test question or any of those answer choices, your little red flag should be going up. Agency can't be implied. Contract law can't be implied. We have to have these express agreements. The contracts either express or implied. Contracts are unilateral or bilateral. In contract speak, lateral means side. So unilateral is one side, only one party has to perform. Bilateral says two parties have to perform. Our offer to purchase and contract is a bilateral contract. Our agency agreements are a bilateral contract. We saw in our agency agreements that the firm has duties to the client has duties to the firm. That's bilateral. We do have an example of a unilateral contract in real estate, and we will talk about that when we get to Unit 10. So hang on to that for just a minute. We have one example, and we will talk about that. Lateral means side. And what we see the most is that bilateral. Both parties have to perform. Let's think about our offer to purchase and contract. I know you haven't met it yet, but what's the gist of it? The seller promises to sell. The buyer promises to buy. Aren't there two promises? The seller promises, I'll sell my home to you in exchange for what? The sales price. It's a two-way street. That's what we mean by a bilateral contract. Contracts can also be executed or executory. An executive contract means it's a done deal. All the promises that we've made, all the terms that we agree to have been fulfilled. So all of our promises, everything that we promised each other we would do, it's a done deal. An executory contract is a contract in motion. We still have something to do. We haven't performed yet. We haven't finished yet. We are under contract, but there's still something that remains to be done. As we're going to learn, our entire contract to closing process is an executory contract. We go under contract and it's executory until it's closed, at which point it becomes executed. So until those terms are fulfilled, it's still a contract in motion. It's still executory. Have you guys figured out by now that real estate's one of those fun industries where one word can have multiple different meanings? Isn't that a lot of fun? Executed is one of those words. Oh, y'all don't know how to have fun. Come on. Executed is one of those words that could have two meanings. So one meaning is that the parties have fulfilled their promises and is closed. The other meaning of an executed contract is that it's been signed. When it's signed, it's executed. When it's closed, it's executed. When the promises have been fulfilled, you just have to rely on your context clues. We're going to look at an example in just a second. So make a note. It's all in your book on page 255. When you see the word execute, you need to use your context clues to figure out what we're talking about. So for example, seller and buyer have signed, i.e. executed, a purchase agreement creating a legally binding contract. Closing doesn't take place until 6 weeks later. Prior to closing, the contract was executory, meaning that its terms remain to be performed. With the completed closing, the contract becomes executed. Now we're saying that the terms have been fulfilled. So 2 meanings. Could be signed, could be that the terms are fulfilled. Now let's talk about the validity of contracts. First off, you have a nice little figure at the top of page 256, gives you a nice little breakdown of the validity of contracts. You also have this. Please snap a picture of it real quick or take a screenshot so you can reference this. Those lines mean something. So we're going to talk about what those lines mean once you guys have this. We got a picture of it with phone or screenshot or something. And we're recording. And you have my PowerPoints. But I just want to make sure you guys have this as reference. So whether or not a contract is valid or not is up to the judge. The judge gets to determine the validity of a contract. And if there's ever a question about the contract, then we take it to the judge. And the first thing the judge is going to ask themselves is if this contract is valid or void. We only have 2 types of contracts. They're either valid or they're void. If they're valid, they have all the essential elements, which we will talk about in just a second. We'll break down those essential elements. Valid contracts. You guys see these little lines here? These lines mean something. Valid contracts are enforceable in a court of law, meaning neither party can get out due to the fact that one of the essential elements is missing. A valid contract is enforceable. It contains all the essential elements. It is valid in a court of law. If you try to get out of an enforceable contract, the judge will look at the contract. They'll see that all the essential elements are there, and they'll say, if you get out of this contract, you are in breach. There's nothing wrong with the contract itself. So a valid contract can become enforceable. A valid contract could also become, by the judge, voidable. There's nothing wrong with the contract itself. The contract meets all of the essential elements. It has all of the required ingredients. A contract can become voidable because one and only one of the parties has the right to go to a judge and say, I shouldn't be expected to carry through with the terms of this contract. Examples of who could make the contract voidable. For example, you cannot force, let me rephrase that, the judge cannot force a minor to fulfill the terms of the contract. So if you're 17 and a half years old and you take your valid contract to the judge and say, I'm not 18 yet, the judge will make the contract voidable. They cannot force a minor to carry through with the terms. Another example, we're going to see several more, but another example, somebody that was drunk or intoxicated when they entered into the contract. If they weren't of their sound, sober mind, the judge can't force them to perform the terms of the contract. So understand, you guys see the lines. It's a valid contract. There's nothing wrong with the contract itself. But because of one, only one, always one party goes to the judge, says, I shouldn't have to carry through with the terms of this. The judge says, you're right. This valid contract has now become voidable. Again, we'll see some more examples in just a second. The key to understanding voidable is seeing that word one, meaning both parties can't go to the judge. It's just the one. Now, the person that was intoxicated when they entered into the contract, or the person that was 17 and a half years old when they entered into the contract, if they never go to the judge, we have a valid contract, don't we? So if they never take that to the judge, this thing could still go through to closing. It could still be fulfilled. It becomes voidable because one of the parties doesn't have a legal principle, a legal leg to stand on. Valid contracts can also, at the discretion of the judge, become unenforceable, meaning either party can take this valid contract to the judge and say, I shouldn't have to carry through with the terms. And the best example we have of an unenforceable contract is a handshake agreement. It's still expressed because we stated the terms, but we didn't put it in writing and we didn't sign. We just shook hands. We could still go to closing unless one of us has a problem. And if either one of us has a problem, we go to the judge and we stand in front of the judge and we said, well, he said this and she said that. He said, she said, he said, she said. The judge says, show me your written contract. Well, we don't have one. We just shook hands. The judge can't enforce that. It becomes unenforceable. The contract itself is still valid. If neither one of us take it to the judge, we could still go to closing. But if we take a handshake agreement to the judge, it cannot be enforced in a court of law. A void contract then is missing an essential element. It's missing one of the required ingredients, which means you never had a contract to begin with. So if you're missing any of the essential elements that we're talking about. So again, you guys remember, there are only two types of contracts. Contracts are either valid or they are void. It's the valid contract then become enforceable, voidable, or unenforceable. Ask yourself first, does it have all the essential elements? If yes, it's valid. If no, it's void. Questions so far? For your exam, please look with me to page 256. The example that you're going to see of a void contract is the example there. Somebody that's been declared legally incompetent by a court of law can make the contract void. The judge is going to say that they don't have the mental capacity to enter into a valid contract. So for your exam, and there's other reasons for a void contract, but for your exam, those examples are there for a reason. Somebody that's been declared legally incompetent by a court of law will have a void contract. Question comes in about the difference between valid and void. Valid contains the essential elements. Void does not contain the essential elements. Talking about the essential elements next. Please bear with me. Let's look at an example of an unenforceable. Oh, sorry. Void and voidable are the same? Nope. A valid contract can become voidable. There's nothing wrong with the contract. A void contract is missing an essential element. Voidable and unenforceable, enforceable, they all start valid because the contract themselves are good to go. Voidable is about the person. Unenforceable is about both people, either people. The valid contracts can become voidable. Everybody show me how many parties can go to the judge and make the contract voidable? How many? Just one. Just one. Maybe it's the minor, maybe it's the person that was drunk. Don't sign stuff when you're drunk. It's just good advice. So let's look at an example. Steve and Ted orally agree that Ted will sell his home to Steve for $175,000. Neither Ted can enforce the oral contract against Steve, nor Steve against Ted. Ted and Steve may voluntarily carry out their agreement and complete the sale. But if either refuses, they don't have a legal remedy. The judge will make it unenforceable because it was an oral agreement. So what are those essential elements for a valid contract? When the judge gets the contract in their hand, what are the required ingredients that the judge is asking themselves? Remember, there's only two types of contracts, they're either valid or void. So the judge has to ask themselves, is this a valid contract? And they're going to ask based on these essential elements, the required ingredients. Do we have legally competent parties? Remember, the minor could enter into the contract. The drunk person could enter into the contract, but they can't be forced to carry out the terms. Valid contracts must have mutual assent. Look at page 257 with me. Mutual assent is also referred to as offer and acceptance. It's also referred to as meeting of the minds. In order to have a valid contract, two parties have to come together and agree to enter into the contract together. Remember, we just said it was voluntary, which means you can't force somebody into a contract. We got to have the meeting of the minds. We have to have an offer made, considered, and eventually accepted. Now that's a red star, meaning we need more information on that. And we will spend time talking about mutual assent. When we get to unit 10, we're going to learn there's this magic moment in time when it goes from being an offer to a legally binding contract. When have we had that meeting of the minds? When have the people have come together and have offer and acceptance? So more on that. Another essential element is legality of object. Again, you cannot have a legally binding contract for an illegal purpose. And then there's that consideration again. I'm telling you guys right now, that's the problem topic when it comes to contracts. There are no such thing as free promises. There's got to be some form of consideration in exchange for the agreement or promises. Whoops, sorry. There's got to be some form of consideration. We tend to think of money, and I think most of the time we'd be right, particularly with our sales contract. I'm going to sell you my house. The consideration is the purchase price. But in basic contract law, which is where we are right now, consideration is just anything of value. So our essential elements, when the judge is trying to determine if a contract is valid or void, the judge is looking for these four ingredients. Does it say anything on there about being in writing? No, we can have an oral valid contract, right? The judge would make it unenforceable. Contracts also have to have this reality of consent. Reality of consent says that we have to have both parties of their sound mind. We cannot have any of these factors and have a valid contract. Well, have a void contract. In the event of reality of consent, if any of these things are present, then the judge is going to make it voidable. So we have to have reality of consent. If not, the judge will make it voidable. So anybody that enters into a contract under duress, they felt violence or the threat of violence. Remember, we just said contracts are voluntary. Can you hold a weapon up to somebody and say, sign this contract? Can you force them into it? You could claim that you entered into the contract under duress. You were forced because you felt threatened. You felt you would be harmed if you didn't sign this contract. The person that felt threatened could take this to the judge, say I was under duress, and the judge would make it voidable. Do you have a question? I think I have an accidental unmute. Also, with reality consent, we can't have undue influence. We just said duress was violence or the threat of violence. Undue influence is kind of the mental or emotional harm. You can't force somebody to enter into under undue influence because you threaten their mental or emotional harm. I think the number one example that we have of undue influence, and this pops up on the news every once in a while, and it just makes me so sad. When we hire somebody to care for our elderly, and that care person takes advantage of the situation and tries to force the elderly to sell their home, the family finds out, they say undue influence because they took advantage of that situation. I'm getting a question, how can that be proven? Well, the judge has to ask a series of questions, don't they? Obviously, I probably don't have documentation of you holding a weapon to me and saying, sign this. But that's up for the judge to ask a series of questions to find out if you did feel duress or if you did feel undue influence. And if the judge determines that you did feel duress or undue influence, then the judge can make the contract voidable. Because remember, contracts are voluntary. You can't force somebody to enter into a contract. Yes, ma'am, Desiree.
So I have a quick question, and I don't know if it's a thing of like morals versus ethics, but what if we do have, like, we come across a situation where we have a client and it's like, it's a good chance that this situation not right, and it can definitely boomerang back on us. But we're not lawyers, we're not cops, we're not detectives, we can't, hey girl, you safe, you all right? Like we can't, like what's our own like scope?
You're going to make a phone call.
Okay.
Who do you think you're going to call? You just said it. If I'm not an attorney,
Oh, the
who do I
police
need to
or
call?
yeah, law enforcement. Yeah.
There you
Yeah.
go. We need to
Okay.
call our attorney. So if we run it, because guys, you said, Desiree, you said it beautifully. We're not attorneys, you guys. We're not PIs. We're not, we are just real estate agents. So if we feel that our client has entered into the contract under duress or undue influence, what are we going to do? We're going to get the law involved now. That's where we get the attorneys that spend a lot more time in Unit 9 on this. That basic contract law. Good question. Thank you. With reality is consent, we can't have misrepresentation. We can't have fraud. I'm going to lump them together just for a second. They're both a lie. Write that down. Misrepresentation and fraud is both a lie. Whether it's misrepresentation or fraud, the judge is going to look at intent. A misrepresentation is a lie, but you didn't mean to. Maybe you were based on information that you thought was true. A fraud is a lie, and you know it's a lie. They're both lies. The difference is intent. Let's say, for example, I am selling 10 acres of land. When I bought the land 20 years ago, I thought I was buying 10 acres. I didn't bother having a survey done when I bought it because, I was trying to save some money. So I thought I was buying 10 acres. The whole time I've owned this land, I thought it was 10 acres. I advertise it for 10 acres. We go under contract. The buyer has a survey done. And lo and behold, it's only 7. We're all shocked. I genuinely thought it was 10. But the buyer survey revealed 7. Did I lie when I advertised 10? Sure, because I put the false information out there. But did I do it on purpose? I was relying on what I thought I knew. That's misrepresentation. Fraud, I have it for 10. I know. Let me think. Fraud, I have 7. I know darn well I only have 7. And I try to sell it for 10. Is there intent there? And that's what the judge is going to look for. Is there intent? And that's the difference between fraud and misrepresentation, both lies. If you're lied to, and you can prove it in a court of law, misrepresentation and fraud could make the contract voidable by the person that was lied to. Mistake of fact gets a little tricky. The judge has to determine if it's a genuine error, if it's fraud. Very similar. There's still an error. Maybe the contract will make it voidable. Maybe it's so insignificant that the judge doesn't find that relevant to the contract. So mistake of fact, can it be voidable? It depends. Duress, threat, violence. So reality of consent, we got to have, this takes us back to our mutual assent, our meeting of the minds. And if any party enters into the contract under these terms, they may be able to make it voidable. Hear me say the word may. I'm not a judge. I can't tell you what they're going to decide. But what I can say is, wow, you may have duress. Let's call our attorney. Everybody with me? We're still not in law school, you guys. Questions? Let's talk about our offer. Over on the top of page 258. The offer is the promise made. There needs to be a response to the offer. There needs to be the consideration of the offer. There's a couple different choices. We're going to talk about that in just a second. More often than not, the buyer makes the offer to the seller. But there are cases where the seller can make the offer to the buyer. So I don't want you guys, as we get into contract law, I don't want you guys to get bogged down on buyer and seller. I want you guys to focus and pay attention and look at on your test, offeror and offeree. Remember back on page 86? Let's go back on page 86 for 1 second. Hold your place in the book and go back to page 86. Remember our giver and receivee? I want you to focus. One person is giving the offer. Another person is receiving the offer. Giver and receivee. Does everybody see my OR and EE? Does that say buyer and seller? Does it? right there on your screen in front of you. Does it say buyer and seller? No. One party is the giver of the offer and a different party is the receivee. More often than not, the buyer gives the offer to the seller. I'm not disputing that. But hear me when I say there could be a case where the seller makes the offer to the buyer. So stop thinking about buyer and seller and start thinking about giver and receivee. So an offer is made, the offeror makes the offer to the offeree. When an offeree receives, they always have three choices. Anytime you receive an offer, anybody receives an offer, they have three choices. They can either accept it, which means they agree to all of the terms exactly the way they are. When the offeree accepts, they have agreed to everything exactly how it is. The offeree can also reject it, which means it's dead on the table. That's a flat out thanks, but no thanks. The third choice that the offeree has is to counter it. A counter offer is a rejection with a but. I'm good with all the terms, but the purchase price and the close day. If I'm good with everything except the purchase price and the closing date, did I accept that offer? Did I accept it as it was? All the terms exactly how they are? No. I said I'm good with everything but the purchase price and the closing date. That's a counter offer. Let me introduce you guys in our last few minutes. Let me introduce you guys to what I call the contract communication wall. We're going to see this again on Thursday. Contract communication wall. On one side of the contract communication wall, I have the offeror. On the other side of the contract communication wall, I have the offeree. When we come together on Thursday, we're going to bring people into this. We're actually going to bring real estate agents into this. We're going to shake it up. But the basic of the contract communication wall, the offeror makes an offer to the offeree. The offeree has three choices. Let's rattle those off together. What are the offeree's three choices? They can accept the offer, they can reject the offer, or they can counter the offer. The offeree always has three choices. Hear my absolute words? In a counter offer, rejection with a but, the roles reverse. The offeree becomes the offeror. The offeror becomes the offeree. The offeror is now presenting a brand new offer to who was the offeror. Anytime you have a counter offer, the roles reverse. So back to the scenario we were just talking about, our sales contract. Let's just say, for example, the buyer starts as the offeror, the seller starts as the offeree. Buyer makes an offer to the seller to buy their house. What are the seller's three choices? They can accept it, reject it, or counter it. If they accept it, they agree to all of the terms exactly the way they are. If they reject it, it's dead on the table. If they counter it, they've said, I'm good with all the terms, but. And in a counter offer, the roles reverse. And now the seller in this example is making a brand new offer to the buyer. What are the buyer's three choices? They can accept it, reject it, or counter. We can counter back and forth till the end of time. We counter until we have acceptance or rejection. Ideally, you guys, in negotiations, let's just talk about purchase price. There's a lot of other terms to the offer. We're going to get to those in Unit 10, but let's just focus on purchase price. Generally speaking, the seller starts up here and the buyer starts down here, right? Buyer makes an offer under what the seller wants. Hopefully, each counter brings us a little closer together, right? Seller comes down a little, buyer comes up. Each counter brings us a little closer together. But eventually, we're going to get to this point, right? And eventually, we need to decide. Either the offeree is going to accept the last offer, or the offeree is going to reject the last offer. Again, we're going to see this again and again and again and again and again. We're going to bring the real estate agent into it in Unit 10, what that means with us being involved in the transaction. What I want you guys focusing on right now is the offer or is the giver of the offer. The offeree is the receivee of the offer. The offeree always has three choices. They can accept it, reject it, or counter it. And in a counter offer, the roles reverse. The seller, remember, a counter offer is a rejection. So the seller is now making an offer to the buyer in this example. More on this, just getting you started, getting you introduced to it. On Thursday, we're going to finish up Unit 9. Again, we're probably done with Unit 9, if not by the first break, soon after. Please look ahead. After Unit 9, we jump into Unit 10, which is more specific to our contract law. Somebody mentioned something about there's a midterm coming up next week, but we can't do it yet because Unit 10 is on your midterm. We're not going to worry about the midterm until we get through Unit 10, but just know you guys have a midterm coming up next week. We'll talk more about that before we leave on Thursday. Questions? All right. Y'all have a good afternoon. We'll see you at 9 a.m. sharp on Thursday.